Hi everyone, welcome to our next video on our banking CLI application. So in the last class we worked on this, defining our data models and entities. Okay, so what we did was we created two entities, account entity and transaction entity. We created getters and setters, and we created a helper. We created getters, okay, and also created a helper method to map our array. That's what we get from the database to our entity object, right? Right. So also we created a transaction entity. We defined properties where we map to tables. Okay, we map to the transaction table, and also created a getter and setter, a getter for it, and we also created a map function. So in the last class, the task was for you guys to work on this mapper function for transaction entity. So if you haven't, this is basically it. So created an instance of transaction. Now, if this is new to you, the self keyword, it basically refers to the current class. Okay, so you can use it in place of saying transaction entity here. Okay, so yeah, so it helps if you, in case you rename this, you won't have to change references to the class. But note, you can only use it within the class. You can't use it if you're outside the class. You have to call it by its name. And also we will populate these values from our record. Okay, and then we return that instance. Okay, so we can here have a sample test. Right, so if we do PHP main, okay, so let's see, do we have any record right now? Alright, sorry, I didn't save that. So undefined variable statement, where is it? Do we have that statement? Okay, yeah, we haven't gotten our instance, so let's do PDO database helper get PDO instance. Then we write a statement, so we can say statement equals PDO prepare. Then we just do select of note SQL isn't case sensitive when it comes to its clauses, but it's kind of a kind of standard or convention for most people to stick to one. So either stick to lower cases or upper cases. I usually prefer lower case, but I could switch between them. So we want to get data from our transactions table. Okay, and let's see, we'll pass some options. So we'll do PDO attributes cursor, and we'll set that to cursor forward only. Okay, and we need to close this method, and after that we'll need to execute our statement. So we just call execute, and then let's see what we have. All right, so we have one transaction, and we are printing the details of the transaction. And I think we missed a property the last time. So if you check, we didn't create balance the last time. Okay, so we didn't map balance, so I've added that. I've added the getter for balance. I think, is it balance or account number? I think one of them. Yeah, I think it's account number. Yeah, so we didn't create the entry for account number, so I've updated that. I also added it in this mapping method, so make sure to do that as well. Alright, so in this video we will be defining our data access helper methods for our entities. So that's what we'll be doing. Alright, so for that we've mapped out a few methods. So for our account entity, we're going to have a find one by ID methods. The idea is they should help us find an account by ID. So this will be useful when we need to locate a particular account by its own ID, either if we want to delete it or want to update it, just to be sure we're working with the right account. We'll also create one find one by username. Now this will really be useful when we are doing our login. Okay, so when we do our login, so we'll have that. Then we'll create one for working with account number. So this will be useful when we need to look up an account by its account number, so we use this. So we'll create one to help us create an account, and we'll create one to help us update an existing account, right? Then we'll also create a few for transaction entity. So we'll create one to find one by ID. So this will be useful when we need to locate a transaction by its ID. We'll create one where we can find a transaction or a list of transactions rather by its account ID. So transaction history, you are either the sender or the beneficiary. Okay, so we would want to list all transactions where you are either the sender or you are the beneficiary. So this will come in handy for that. And we'll have create transaction, which will allow us to create a transaction, and this will be to update an existing transaction, okay, if we need to. All right, so let's do that. Okay, so there are different ways you can do it. You can create it in the account entity class, or you can create it maybe in a separate class, maybe a repository class, and then have that handle all the interactions between the entity and the database. But we'd like to keep things simple, so we'll be working on this. We'll be creating this in the account entity helper method. So let's do that. Okay, so the first one, we will create just a public function. Okay, I want to make it static so that we can access it statically. So we'll say find one by ID. So passing an ID, and here we'll return either a transaction, an account entity, or no. Okay, so this question mark symbolizes in this could be null. That's what it will return, could be null. Okay, so it's either going to return an account entity or no, right? So the first thing we need to do is to get our PDO instance. So let's do that. So say PDO, or we could prepare a query first. So let's say query equals to select all from accounts. That's what we call our table, where ID equals. Now we could do this. We could say ID, right? But this opens us to SQL injection. So you want to read up on that. You don't want to trust what the user would send, okay, as the ID, because they could include an SQL statement and then close out your previous statement, then execute an actual malicious SQL code, maybe to find out the users or to get maybe records in your table. So you want to prevent that. Okay, now so instead of doing that, what we can do is we can add a placeholder, okay, that represents the ID we are going to be passing, and then we can fill it or bind it to the actual value that we want to replace the placeholder with. Okay, so if we prepare that, so get our PDO instance. So say database helper get PDO instance, right? And on this PDO instance, we'll generate a statement. So say statement equals PDO prepare. Then we pass our query, and then we can pass maybe some options. So say PDO cursor, yeah, attribute cursor. I want to make it forward only, right? Okay, so we can do statement execute, but wait, something is missing. We haven't passed our ID to this. We haven't bound the ID to this placeholder here. So how do we do that? Well, we can do that before we execute our SQL statements. So we can say statement bind param, where we pass the placeholder. So basically what represents the value you want to pass, so which is ID. So you could either do ID with the column or without the column. So it's up to you. I prefer putting it without the column. And then so we are saying we are binding this placeholder value with the actual ID we're passing to the function here. Then we execute. Okay, so to receive this data, we're going to create an account variable that will hold the account entity, so it will be null by default, and we're going to loop through the data we received from this method, okay, from this query here. So we can say row equals statement fetch a sock, and then we pass can say PDO, okay, sorry, this is fetch followed by PDO fetch. The fetch mode is fetch a sock, right? Okay, so if we get a value, we'll assign that to account, but first we need to map that record from the database, okay, to an account entity. So we're going to use the map to entity function to do that, method rather. So entity equals to map to entity followed by the row if we have it. Okay, so and since we're looking for just the first match, okay, we would break here, so we don't need to continue. Once we find the first record, we'll break because we're expecting only one record, right? So, and thanks to our unique key for ID column, ID is the primary key, so we should have only one record that matches this ID or none, right? And then we return the account variable or whatever is in there. Alright, also you could set the limit here if you want to. You can say limit 1, okay, but this isn't really useful right now. Maybe for this is useful where you want to just get the first match and you could have potentially more records, but you just want to get the first match. So you want to add that limit to make it more performant, or you could even, but right now it won't make much sense because ID is unique. Okay, right, so that's that. So let's test this to see if it works. So I'm going to comment on this, right? Let's see. Okay, I'll need this, so I'll steal a bit of this. So we're going to see account equals account entity find 1 by ID. I will pass in a random ID. Then yeah, let's just do this. So let's say if account is not null, then we display this. Else we will display echo no record with id meow found. Maybe we might want to have this in a variable so that it will be like nice. So you just say id equals that, then we can pass that here, and then we can interpolate it here. Alright, so let's see what we have. Alright, so we have no record with an id called meow. That's nice. We want to add a PHP URL to make it nice. So what if we add an actual ID? I think we should have something with this ID here. Let's try it again. Beautiful. So we do have a record, so this works. Now we could do the same for find one by username, find one by account number. It's basically a duplication of this. Okay, so we could copy, paste, then do a bit of change. So this would be username, maybe we could call this username too. Username here, then we have a variable called username, so we're modifying that as well. And don't forget to change the name of the method to username. Yeah, that basically solves it. And then we could replicate the same for account number. So let's do account number. The name of the column is account number. Here we're going to call it account number. Now you could name it whatever you want to name it, maybe ACC or number, it's up to you. Right, so here we are saying the account number. So you'll map this to account number, and also change the name of the method to find by account number. Okay, I could test to make sure we're good. So let's see, what does this have? Could echo the account. Maybe here we could do maybe the username instead of the full name. Could say get username, and then here I could say account number, account get account number. Right, so let's see. Good. Right, so let's try using the username here. So let's see username. Here is, we have tests at PHP. Let's use .com. Let's see by username. Let's see if it works. Okay, so we have find by username argument. Username must be of type string, not given. Okay, that's because we didn't change that. Okay, so we have, right, so this was good to test. Let's see, we have a reference to ID somewhere. Let's see. Alright. Okay, let's see. Let's see. What do we have? Undefined variable ID in line 149. Yes, 149. Where? 149. Where is ID? Should I have ID? Okay. Oh yeah, here. We don't have any record. So let's do that. So let's see. Username. Right, so now I could, but what if we do .NET? Beautiful. and let's try searching by account number. So for account number, let's do that. So now on VS Code and most code editors, you have a way to select multiple, to have multiple selections. So you could highlight this and maybe highlight every entry of username which was there previously, so you just rename at once. Or you could even have like a rename feature, maybe where you right click, you do rename symbol or rename variable, and every occurrence of that variable would be changed. For now we have to do it manually, so let's do that. And also let's not forget to add that here, account number. I think we should be good. Great. So we don't have this because we are doing find one by username instead of account number. So let's rename that. Nice. So we have a record. Right. So we do have one left, which is two actually. So we have create account. So this will be useful on sign up. So let's do that. So what do we need to create an account? Okay, let's see. We need a username. This will be provided by the user. Sign up. The password hash will be generated, but it will come from the thing that's signing up. The full name, balance. We could have a default balance, but let's make balance come from the service. Now this account number, we don't want the user to specify the account number, we want it to be generated by the system. Okay, so the user wants, but the service or whatever is in charge of doing that will handle the creation of the account number and also the PIN. A PIN doesn't need to be provided, but we'll ask for it anyways. So we need this 6 entities to, or 6 values to be able to sign up a user. Right, so all we can do is, there are 2 ways we could go about it. We could create a function and accept all these values. So we could say create, and we could ask for these values. We could say username, maybe we'll do something like this: string username, string password hash, string what do we have here, full name, balance. Okay, so full name, balance is going to be float, so say balance. Then what else do we have? Account number, so account number, and we can say pin hash, which will be a string. Now pin hash might be null, so we could make it a nullable string, pin hash, and then set it by default to null. Okay, so close this, then we'll say we are either returning an account entity or null. So if it wasn't successful, we will return null, but if it was, we'll return an account entity, and then we can create that account. So how do we do that? Write our query first. So say query. Note you could have this all in one line. Okay, just a bit neater this way. Alright, or maybe we could do this so that it doesn't look weird. Yes, and then we could have the others like in, yeah, I think I might just like this. Yes, much better. Alright, so let's see. For query, we're going to do insert into account values. Now we want to specify the data we want to enter, but so ID, the method that will be creating this record will be responsible for generating the ID and the dates. Okay, that's the timestamps. Everything else will be getting them from what's it called? We'll be getting them the from the caller, okay, of this function. Okay, so let's be explicit. So we need ID, we'll need username, we need password, hash, we'll need what do we need? We need the phone name. I think that's what it's called there. We need the balance, we need account number, we need pin hash, we need created at, and we need last modified at. Okay, so like my query, it hasn't ended yet, but I'd like to stop it here, and I'll add to that query space. Let's do the space here. So values, then we add our values. So we can have our placeholder. So say username, password, hash, colon, phone name, colon, balance, colon, account number, colon, pin hash, colon, created at, and colon, last modified at. Now, since the created at and last modified at, when creating, is actually the same thing, okay, we could just have one placeholder for that and just call it timestamp, so we don't have to do this. So we just need to repeat it again, timestamp, right? Yeah, so this should be fine. Then we get our instance. Okay, yeah, so we haven't ended this, so yes. So get a PDO instance, so say PDO equals to database helper, get PDO instance, right? And then we get our statement, so say statement equals query, PDO, prepare, pass our SQL query in there, and we don't need to pass any options because we aren't doing a select. Well, there are options that are available for insert, but for now we won't be passing them in. Alright, so then we'll execute a statement, but before we do that, don't forget we have parameters we need to bind. So let's do bind param. So we'll do ID. Now I mentioned that we'll have a way of creating a unique ID. So maybe what we can do is I'm not sure if we should include it. PHP has a function called unique ID. I think we can use. Let's see, ID, unique ID. I'm not sure if this is what it's called, but let's do that and see. Okay, I do have something I haven't closed. Okay, let me just comment on that. I know this might fail because we haven't returned anything, so I'll just return null here. Right, okay, yeah, so this works. Yeah, so this should create a unique ID, but we need to be careful. There are better functions we can use to create these unique IDs to ensure like real uniqueness. You can use UIDs, okay, and there are even better like modern UIDs like UIDs v7, which you can use to generate a time-bound UID, okay, that contains data to represent when the record was created. This helps to avoid duplicates in the future. Okay, maybe we'll refactor that later. Right, but for now this is enough for what we need. Right. So for this we would pass a unique ID here. So let's do that. Now remember, what we are doing is we're binding this to parameters, okay, or values of associative array. It's not really nice to create or to just pass, because if we pass a function, if we say unique ID, we're passing a callable here. We should get the value first and then bind this to the variable that has the value. Okay, so we should create an ID elsewhere. So let's do that. So for some of the values we need, let's create that. So we'll say ID equals unique ID, and for the date we'll just call it now, or let's call it timestamp equals to, we'll create an instance of the current date and time. So immutable, I think we need to pass now, which is for the current time. So I'm not creating a variable, I just want the instance of it, and on that instance, that's why I'm doing this. I could do something like this, maybe now equals new date time immutable, and then call the format on it by saying now format, then passing the format of the time. So I could do this, okay, or we could do it in an instance of this data, of this class rather, and then just put this, because after this we might not need this now variable, so there's no need to have it created when we would discard it immediately, except if we want to keep the object for later usage. Okay, I personally won't be doing that. So alright, so we have our ID, we have our timestamp, and we have the rest of the data here. So let's start binding. Okay, so for this we'll replace this with ID, then we'll do statement bind param, we'll say username, which should map to username will be passing, so username, I can type that correctly, and thanks to copy and paste that I've been saving lives, we would be copying a few lines. Okay, so please don't forget to ensure that that's why it might be best to type them out. Let's type them out. Right, password hash, so statement bind param, my key is failing me. Right, full name here. Alright, what next do we need? Bind param, need balance. What else do we need? Let's do pin hash. So pin hash could be null, but that's fine. Statement bind param, What else do we need? We have, okay, yeah, we haven't gotten the account number. Note, there is no order to it. You can add, if you notice, we haven't done account number, so you could do it at any time. Okay, you could do it at the beginning, at the end, it doesn't matter. Okay, as long as it's bound, then that's fine. Okay, so next we'll need the timestamp. So timestamp is just one. We're using the same variable for both the same placeholder for both the created at and last modified at, since the last time the record was modified was when it was created at this time. So we'll just need to do it once. So we'll say timestamp, then we pass what we have here, timestamp. Right, now ideally you want the database to generate this value, but then you'd have to add some defaults to your SQL statement, so that, and if you do that, you could omit even this, and if your ID is auto increment, you could omit this as well. However, I'm usually against numerical IDs. Okay, well, I'm not necessarily against it, but I don't advocate using it. Okay, like you should have it, you should have a numerically, you should have an auto increment ID, but don't rely on it to how do I put it, to serve as unique references of your records when showing the user. Okay, this is because with it they can try putting other values and they might get records, okay, that they are not supposed to have access to. So for example, the ID to maybe a transaction is, let's say, 20 something, and in your web application you have slash, maybe slash transaction slash 20 some 22, let's see, and then they see the details of that transaction. Well, they could put 42, and if you're not careful, if you've not added protection to make sure that, okay, transactions you can see must be your transactions, they could view the details of an existing transaction that doesn't belong to them. However, if you use maybe slugs or unique, some randomly generated strings like UIDs, okay, then it's very extremely difficult for them to guess the next, or would I say, the ID of a different record. Okay, so once we've done that, then we should execute the statement, right? So let's do statement execute. Okay, so once this is done, our insert statement should be executed. Okay, and we should return an instance of AccountEntity if this goes well. But how do we get our ID, right? That's a good question. All right, I think there's something we can use in the PDU. I think the last insert ID or something. I'm not really sure. Let me check. Hold on one moment. Alright, last insert ID. Yeah, that's actually correct. Okay, so let's see if it works. How are you feeling now? Okay, good developers, let's send this. Right. Okay, so we need the last ID to look up the record that was created last. So let's do ID. So with that, I think this can be null if there was nothing. Well, we could trust it, right? I'm not sure. It could return null, but we need to be very, very careful. Okay, so what if it doesn't return? What if it returns null? So let's do a check there. So we can say if ID is not equal to null, right? It's not equal to null, then we can do we could do account equals uh, yeah, account equals, let's see, oh yeah, we could do self find one by ID. So we want to find a record with that ID that was last inserted here. So let's do that. So pass that ID, and whatever we get here, we would return it, right? And if we don't get anything, then well, we'll just return no. Right, so let's test that. Right, so let's comment on this here. Let's see, account equals account entity create, and let's pass our values. So let's see, what do we need first? We need username, password, hash. Let's see, username. Let's do Andromedas. Let's do this. So password, just use something like this. What else do we need? Full name. So let's do Andromedas. Then what do we need again? I think balance account number, pin hash. So for balance, let's do, let's see, 50,000. Account number, let's do, what was our last account number? Okay, so maybe can just add A2 to it, and then we don't need to pass this because pin hash is null. And let's do a var dump on the data we got if it was successful. Right, let's do this. Okay, what is it? Okay, we did end this statement. Okay, that. Right, uncopy your object not in prerequisite state. Last val is not yet defined in the session. 131 stack trees. Okay, so what's the cause here? Didn't we execute the statement before we did that? I was supposed to call this on statement itself. Let's see. Well, I think it inserted it. It just didn't work. Let's try. Okay, it did actually insert it because now we have this violation, but we need to find out what's causing this error. Last val is not yet defined. Were we too fast for it? I can't remember what might be the cause, but we'll need to look into that. Let's see, last val is not yet defined. Okay, so let's try again. Let's maybe sleep. let's sleep for a while, maybe like 1 second, and see if it changes anything. So let's do .com. I think we should have a unique constraint on our account number. If we don't, we need to fix that. Beautiful. Okay, I didn't save. I didn't solve it. And we have an issue here. We shouldn't allow duplicate creation with the same account number, but we'll fix that later. So last value is now a defined intersection. Let's see. Okay, why don't we do it this way? Since we have unique by username, let's try using that username, right? So let's see, but we'll fix this later. Let's say fix this next time. I'll investigate why this is happening, but for now, let's try another method. So let's say, so we do account equals self, find one by username, and then we pass the username, and then whatever we get, we return it back. Okay, let's see. Okay, so let's try this time. Aha. So let's do .org here. Beautiful, so it works. Alright, so that solves that for updates and for create. So we'll pause here and we'll continue in the next video where we complete this one, and then we'll do for transaction entities. So we can consider this done. Alright, see you guys in the next one.